welcome to the third true crime documentary we're covering this month. So we're going to be doing Into the Fire as promised last month. So this is actually 2 episodes, not 3. So we're going to be splitting them up right in the middle because so much content in each episode. So we're going to be doing it that way. So let's jump into it. So, episode 1 starts with, well, let's be real, this real amazing woman. We'll be introduced to her in a very quick second. But she says to us, you can't run on everything, but you can run on anger. It doesn't need to be fed, it doesn't need to sleep. And I love that. I mean, I'm here for all of that. So that amazing woman, her name is Cathy, and she tells us about meeting her husband, Ed. So they met, I think they're like at a bar, I believe, and then they didn't see each other again for a bit. They end up in the same place again together, and sparks flew at that point. She ended up moving to New Orleans, from New Orleans to Massachusetts. And they got married on the way there, and they have been together ever since. A month in to their relationship, she tells him about having a daughter when she was younger, a baby girl that she gave up for adoption. She was 16 when she had her daughter, and she had her in 1974. And basically how this kind of turned out, she didn't give her up for adoption right away. Her mother basically, her words, cornered her and basically forced her into putting her up for adoption, basically saying, oh, she'll have a better life if you do. So she did when she was 9 months old. And she's like, maybe she will have a better life than I can give her. And she never heard anything about her daughter again because it was a closed adoption. So that was basically that. And she didn't have like a great relationship with her mother. So I think like it's probably a lot of resentment there. And I think she kind of took off after that. Or I think maybe she took off later on before she got pregnant. But yeah, so this is what she ended up doing. So 35 years later, she gets this letter from the agency where she put her daughter up for adoption, telling her, or she thought they were telling her, oh, like her daughter wants to see her. She wants to meet her now. By the way, her daughter was named Alexis. So she does refer to her as Alexis, but her legal name is different, but we'll get to that in a minute. So she thought like Alexis wants to see her. And she's like, oh no, that's actually not what was in the letter. The letter basically said that Alexis had been missing since the 80s, so late 80s. I put mid 80s, was late 80s. And they had found a body and that closely resembled Alexis. And basically the police needed Cathy's DNA to try to figure out if this was Alexis or not. So she does, and she's told basically to wait at that point. Nothing else you can do but wait until they finally test the DNA, which, as we know, as people who we listen to true crime, watch true crime, whatever it is that you do to consume true crime, knows that the DNA can take months, if not years. So it's going to be a long wait. But she's like, Cathy, she says, you know what? Fuck that. Not waiting. I need to find my daughter. So the agency won't say anything to her because, again, as mentioned, it was a closed adoption. So they're not going to talk to her about anything. So she's like, I know when she was born. I know her birthday. So I'm going to try to figure out if I can find someone who closely resembles in terms of the birth, right? Birth date. So she, I believe at this point, ropes Ed in to help her do that because she's like, I didn't know how to use a computer before any of this. So she kind of needs that help to do that. So in doing the search, um, they end up finding out that there is a person named Aundria Michelle Bowman who has the same birthday. Born, I think they had a location where she was born as well. So everything matches. This is Alexis. So yes, they do refer to her legal parents, her adoptive parents, refer to her as Aundria because that's her name, legally speaking. So I will refer to her as Aundria when we're talking to those people or talking of those people who know her as Aundria. But for respect for Cathy, and Cathy is the one that I root for, I'm calling her Alexis. And that's that. Other, and you know, in other respects. So she tried to get information on Alexis, found nothing. So she kind of goes to the, sorry if you can hear my bird playing with his toy. He has a new toy, guys. I'm sorry. But she ends up starting a Facebook page called Find Aundria M. Bowman to see if that can get any traction to finding people who know who she is. And then the messages just come flooding in. So we are going to start being introduced to those people who reached out to Cathy. We meet Sue, who is a cousin of Brenda, who is Alexis's adoptive mom. So that's who we meet first. We find out a little more information about Brenda. So Brenda married this man named Dennis Bowman. They met right out of high school. They got married in 1971, and he ended up joining some form of the military, and they were stationed in Virginia. That is very important. Hold on to that information. They're stationed in Virginia. They tried to start a family. Unfortunately, though, they were told that the chances of Brenda getting pregnant were very slim. So from that information, they ended up signing up to adopt a child instead. And they got the call to adopt Alexis. So that's how Alexis got into their lives, which again, they would have adopted Alexis fairly early on in their marriage. They would have maybe been about 3-4 years in. So that's kind of that. So that's when, Alexis enters the picture for Brenda and Dennis. So from there, they moved from Virginia to Hamilton, Michigan. Then they find out unexpectedly they're expecting another baby. So she was able to get pregnant. And Sue, in this moment, bless her heart, when telling the story, I don't think she means any ill will by saying this, but it's like this, maybe don't say it like this, but she says, now they have a family. Well, they had a family even before they had Alexis. Yeah, I mean, again, as a person who was married, I considered my little duo as that was my family. He was my family. And then from there, you grow your family. So it's, bless her heart though. No, I love Sue, no ill will, but I just think the wording, ugh. So then for Alexis, high school comes along. They would say that according to Brenda and Dennis, again, they're not a part of this documentary, but we do hear a lot of the interviews and stuff from Brenda and Dennis. But they kind of say like she was Alexis was a very good baby. She was a great kid. She was well behaved. But then it was kind of around high school where things kind of started to blow up. And again, let's preface here. Alexis was 14 when she went missing. So there wasn't a lot of, as we all know, again, we were all teenagers. We go through that rebel phase. We go through that phase of I know it all, right? When we don't. But we all go through that. Like you go through a transition, but there is so much more going on that we'll get into. But it's just, yeah. They say, or we hear from Dennis in one of the interviews, Dennis says that about 12 or 13, it's like a light, like a flip switched in Alexis. And he said it was for no reason. No reason. She was starting to run away from home. Didn't know why. She was stealing. She was punching holes in walls. And again, Dennis says, I don't know. But we're going to figure out that there is a reason. Despite the fact that he wants to pretend there isn't, there is a reason. But again, like I said, for those who didn't watch the documentary before listening to me, or you haven't watched it when it came out, we will get to it. But it's just like, there's a reason, and you know why. We'll get to it. So the day that she went missing, they're kind of saying it seemed like a normal day. Brenda had to go work. So Dennis drove her. I believe he took, at that point, they had their second child. I think her name's Victoria. So they had her, or he brought her, but not sure if Alexis was home at the point that they left. But I think if my recollection is correct, she wasn't home yet when they left with the baby. So he leaves and drives Brenda to work. When he gets back to the house, he just felt like something was wrong. So he went upstairs to his bedroom and sees that the door to his bedroom that is normally locked was busted open. Money, it's gone, that he had in the room, or they had in the room. So he calls the police and reports Alexis as missing because he was looking around for Alexis, couldn't find her. So he, calls the police and reports her as missing. And everyone was looking for her to try to find, where is she, right? Tips are starting to come in saying that they're spotting her in Holland, a place I think in Michigan. They're spotting her there. But she's bleached her hair now. There's another tip that says, oh, she's pregnant now. And there's another tip saying, oh, she's working as a stripper. All horrible things, really and truly. Like, it's one thing to say, oh, I think I spotted her here. Oh, I think she's bleached her hair now. I get that part. But it's like, oh, she's pregnant. Oh, she's this or she's that. And it's just like, come on. And to me, we're going to get into it. I think we kind of get into it in a little bit. But this kind of mirrors Cathy's life a little bit. And it's weird to me. I don't want to go too far in because I don't want to give the plot away, but it feels like someone knew the details of her biological mother and ran with it. That's what it feels like to me. It just feels very coincidental for what we're about to hear. Maybe it's just the runaway trope and this is what people do when they run away, but it just seemed really interesting that it seemed to mirror so closely to Cathy. But that's just me. It just seemed really weird. So Brenda would constantly go out there looking for her, drive in the car, try to find her, until one day Dennis was like, listen, you got to stop looking for her. She's gone. She's just gone. So for me, I'm not a mother. Not yet, anyway. But if I were, I don't even have to be a mother. If I know someone in my life's child is gone, or it happens to me, knock on wood, that my child is just gone, and the father, who is supposed to be the father of this child, is saying, just stop trying to find her. That to me would be red flags galore. Because I am not gonna stop looking for my child. Absolutely not. I will be 6 feet under before I stop looking for my child. And for someone, especially the father of that child, to say, just stop looking, she's gone. It's, to me, it's like, again, it's red flag central. What are you not telling me? How do you know she's gone? Because we're hearing there's tips out there saying we're seeing her here, there, and everywhere. So she's not, quote unquote, gone. I'm going to find my fucking kid. But what do you know that's making you tell me she's gone and not coming back? That I'm just supposed to stop? That doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense to me. Again, I don't want to go too far into this because for those who've watched this documentary knows where this is going. And maybe people who haven't watched it are gathering what's happening here. But I'm just like, what do you mean she's gone? What do you mean? That is I can't compute that. Anyway, so we learn about a little bit about Cathy and her history. So she says when she had Alexis, she had actually ran away. Her mother was abusive, which I would have so many issues, honestly, there. But her mother was abusive. It wasn't great. So she fled to New Orleans when she was 14 years old. And as we know, Alexis was 14 years old when she's now gone missing. You see what I mean? That's the parallels with that. And Cathy would say that she kind of got into different things. And as we know, she got pregnant and everything like that. I don't know she was necessarily stripping, but like, we know, like, there is like, you know, she had it rough for a little bit. And it's just interesting that the tips that are coming in, it just seems so weird. And also the fact that, like, oh, she's bleached her hair. Well, Cathy's blonde. It's very weird to me. Like, it's just like, And I'm saying this for a reason for a little later, but will technically probably be in the second episode. But I'm just like, what the hell? It just seemed really weird. So then we meet Carl. He's a web sleuth, y'all. He's actually been doing good though. He's been doing really good. He started helping to start solving missing person, I should say, cases. So he's been kind of working with that, and he's been doing a lot of good, doing a lot of the work, and actually helping. And he's actually solved cases, so it's great. So he talks about this Jane Doe. This is, if you remember earlier, a few minutes, well, at the beginning of the episode, we talked about the fact that the police had found a body that seemed to closely resemble Alexis. And the reason that all of this kind of happened with Cathy being told, we need your DNA to see if this is Alexis. So this is that Jane Doe. And they thought of, obviously, like I just said, thought of Alexis. So he linked that Jane Doe to 13 different cases of missing people. So the age of Jane Doe, who was found in 1999, so 10 years later, after Alexis had gone missing, is close to that right age. The facial features are also very similar. Like, if you watch the documentary, just also trigger warning, because there's no freaking warning. They actually show us a picture of that Jane Doe, deceased, and we kind of see like him creating a face from that, because there's a face, you can see a face, but like obviously she's deceased, so they try to make a face of a person alive. And let me tell you, when he finishes, it definitely does look like Alexis. So after 3 years, this is what I mean. We have issues, y'all. We have, like, I know maybe they'll prioritize other cases that we need to figure out sooner rather than later, and this person's already deceased. But it's like, come on, we gotta do better. But it took 3 years for them to test that DNA that Cathy had given. And we find out Jane Doe is not Alexis. And I really hope that we have at least figured out who this person is. I really do. But the fact that Carl kind of has narrowed it down to these 13 people, I'm hoping that um, they have gotten a lot closer to figuring out who this is. So then we meet Chris Haverdink, who is the detective on the case. He's the current day detective on the case. And he actually went to school with Alexis, so he knows who she is. And he kind of talks about, like, when she went missing, nothing was really discussed about it. Oh, Alexis was gone? Okay, and we move on with life. That's kind of how this was treated. This is how the police treated it. This is, well, like, let's be real, this is how her parents treated it. And this is how people, except for the people who loved and cared for her, which were her friends, treated it. And this is how, well, this is kind of what happened with a lot of runaways. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm sorry, if a minor is running away, we shouldn't just be like, oh, well, she'll show up eventually or something. No, we got to go out there and find them because they shouldn't be out there on their own. So we meet this amazing woman named Meta. She kind of tells us a little bit of a story, and this is where the documentary takes a turn. So she was abducted in Michigan back in 1989, so the same year that Alexis went missing. She was going to her friend's house. She was 6 years old. Listen, the 80s were different, man. 6-year-olds are going to their friends by themselves. I mean, damn, I wasn't even allowed to walk from home. But, and again, I grew up in the late, like, as an older child, grew up in the late 90s into the early 2000s. Born in 91, but it's just like, I wasn't allowed to walk home by myself until I was maybe 11, 12. So that would have been like 2002, 2003. No, I was probably going home before that. But anyway, like like 2000, 2001, 2002. It was kind of roughly probably around the time I was able to walk home by myself when I'm 10, 11. Um, Times were just different in the 80s. I was just, again, like, though, it was just 2 years before I was born, but it was, geez. Anyway, she's 6 years old, going home, going to see her friend. Either way, this is not her fault, by the way. It's not her parents' fault. This is not, that's not what I'm saying. But I was just like, damn. But she said that's something that she did all the time. She did this all the time. And her mom trusted that, trusted she's getting to where she's going. And all, so this was not an irregular thing. So yes, she's 6 years old. And this is when that disgusting person sees her and tells her while seeing her walking to her friend's house and says to her, "Oh, hey, your mom? She told me like I could go show you some puppies when she's supposed to be going and seeing her friend. So why would her mom tell her that?" Again, though, this is a 6-year-old and she's thinking, "Oh, my mom said that I can go see puppies, and this man says like it's telling me that, so I'm gonna trust that," because she is 6 years old. And she was close enough to him that he just grabs her, puts her in the car. And she says, he was nice at first. He was, being nice with her until he wasn't. And they kind of get to wherever it is that he took her, gets a rope, and starts yanking this 6-year-old child by the neck. Like, I think of myself at 6 years old and I want to cry because this could have happened to anybody. And this poor little girl is just, she's terrified. And he took her out into the woods and sexually assaults her. After it was over, by the grace of God, they hear dogs barking, which means there are people nearby. And he gets spooked and he ends up leaving her there. He leaves her there because of course he's going to leave her there, but he leaves the 6-year-old child there to, what, die? Let's be real. He left her there to die. So she is able to untie herself. This amazing little girl is able to untie herself. And she runs out into the road. She is naked, runs out into the road to get help, and she gets help. I can't even imagine this ordeal that this girl went through. And like she, at this point, like she would have been, so 6, she close to 40, maybe a little over 40. Math, guys. And she just remembers all of this very vividly. And I don't know how you don't, though, but like she remembers this like it's yesterday. You can just see it. So she explains now as an adult, she wanted to find him. Obviously, she couldn't find him. She wanted to find the person who completely changed her life from that point on. And then the internet became a thing. It was a lifesaver. It made it a little easier for her to find the asshole who did this to her. And she does say here she thought it was a little odd that Alexis went missing around the same time and wonders, could my case and her case be linked? Maybe it's the same person, right? Until she goes on a Facebook page, the fine Aundria Bowman, and she sees a picture of her father, Dennis Bowman, and says, oh my God, that's who abducted me. And I can tell you guys, when I first watched this documentary, my heart dropped. Like I feel like I know this is where this is going, but my heart dropped. And I'm like, what the fuck? So an abductor and a pedophile is the person who is raising Cathy's daughter. So we kind of start to figure out, could it have been Dennis? Starting to kind of bring out the evidence, also triangulating where he lives in the area versus where all of this happened. So they say he worked in the area. He went to church in the area. She was abducted in a red pickup truck. He had a red pickup truck at the time. And then she says, I heard his voice. You don't forget a voice. I'm just, I'm getting goosebumps even just talking about it. And it's just like, what the, I can't. And I can't imagine Cathy finding out, like, who the fuck raised my kid? I just, you're thinking, and Cathy does say this at one point in the documentary, her mother told her she's going to have a better life with someone else. And she didn't get that. Instead, she got this crazy fucker as a father. And how heartbreaking that is. And listen, for the people who truly want this for the right reasons and want a child and believe they can give the best to a child, adoption is an amazing thing. And you just have these cases that just muddy the fucking waters. And it's just horrible. So this is where she said, as I said, who the hell adopted my daughter? She's like, this is a house of fire. Do I walk past the house of fire and say, meh, not going to deal with it? Or do I go in that fire and let it burn me? Hell, girl, I'm going in the fire with you. We're going in this fire with you. And we're all getting burned. Because it's horrific. So this is when she says, I am going to take it up a notch. So she goes to Michigan. And she's meeting all of these people who knew Alexis. And she goes and she meets Sue. And Sue says to Cathy, Brenda would make these comments, like whenever they would come over and make these comments like, oh, did you hear what the kid did? Like, just so flippant. How about, I mean, yes, you can kind of hear, you talk about things, like sometimes your kids do some stupid things, you're just like, God, you know what I mean? But you like, at least be like, did you hear like what Aundria did? Like, God. Or like, oh, let me tell you what Aundria did. Like, I've gotta be patient with these babies. You can have like you can talk about things. I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily in that, but to be so flippant of did you hear what the kid did? Like, what? And Sue's like, with like, this is your child. And then she meets Michelle, who was another friend of Alexis, Jennifer as well. And they tell the story about Dennis chasing Alexis around. And she's running around and she goes upstairs and he chases her upstairs. And he clearly catches up to her and beats her. And you want to know why he beats her, y'all? Because she came home late from school. Shit. So, like, I could have dealt with something worse if I was coming home late from school. You know what I mean? Like, if I was even a few minutes late, I had my grandmother walking there by the end of the neighborhood being like, where is she? But no one beat me because of it. You know what I mean? Like, this guy has fucking problems and should never have been a father. But of course, he has to kind of have these different faces, right? And not everyone gets to see those faces. But Alexis did. So she also does say, like, we weren't late getting off the bus or getting home. Like, she wasn't late. He just wanted an excuse to beat her because he's a psychopath. Kim, I think, is another friend, mentions that her parents, meaning Brenda and Dennis, were eating burgers while Alexis and Kim had relish sandwiches. This is again how they treated Alexis. And Brenda, whether this was Dennis kind of doing this and Brenda's following along, or they're both doing this together, I don't know, but she says, like, Brenda didn't do anything. Of course, Brenda didn't do anything. We'll talk about why Brenda doesn't do anything in a minute. Or maybe potentially next episode, I'm not sure. But Jennifer tells us that Alexis was locked in her room for 4 days. And then she drops this bomb. Alexis told her that Dennis was also sexually assaulting her because, like I said, he is a pedophile. So one day, I guess to get help, Alexis goes to the principal's office to say, like, this is happening to me. But she says, here's the problem, though. Because I've been through it too, she says. You can't go to the principal's office and say, this is happening to me. Have the police come in to talk to her because they're also going to bring the parents in while you're telling them this. How do you tell the police while your parents sitting there and tell them, oh, dad's sexually assaulting me? You can't. Because what happens if they don't believe you? You have to go back home with them. So, like, how do you do that? Agreed. Brenda tells us that that Alexis told her, Dad is molesting me. And do you want to know what this bitch says to her daughter? Oh, you're lying. You're lying. Are you kidding me? Again, if I were to be told by my child, Dad is doing this to me, oh, I'm going to prison because I'm killing the fucker. Are you kidding? Absolutely not. I'm going to prison. I'm going to prison, y'all, because he's dead. He's dead. And I would have been responsible for it. Like, I mean, yes, you do have to ask questions. Yes, you do have to kind of go through that and everything. But if you know your child and you know they want to just say this, you got to believe them. I'm sorry, you just do. Um, and I'm sorry with what we're kind of starting to realize about Dennis, he most likely was. And this woman just wants to sit there and be like, oh, you're lying. And there's a reason why she says that. Like I said, we'll get to it in a minute, but they end up taking her to the pastor, not a therapist, to a pastor. And it's there that Alexis recants because she has no choice but to recant. She's probably being forced to do so. I hate it here. So her friends would say, oh, you need to leave, you need to leave. But Alexis refused. And the reason she did was because so her sister's name is Vanessa, sorry, not Victoria. She would say that she didn't want to leave Vanessa. And it's actually really heartbreaking, kind of knowing we don't really hear much from Vanessa. We don't even fully know what she looks like. We do kind of see her a little bit a little later. But it's kind of hard kind of knowing that really Vanessa's not really on her side. Or I don't know if you can really even say that. I think she's unfortunately in a really hard situation. But ultimately, Alexis kind of gave up her life to protect Vanessa. The only person who's trying to, well, not the only person, but like the person who really pushed this along to kind of do something for Alexis was Cathy. And it's really sad. I don't know. It's really sad to me. But Jennifer also says that Alexis says, like, I will stay here until Vanessa is older. Then I will leave. And this broke my heart. I will leave and I'll find my real mom. And I think I cried the first time that I heard this because I'm just like, oh my God. Like, oh, it just, because Cathy kind of does say, like, she hoped that she would try to come find her one day. And to kind of hear that that is kind of what she wanted, at least then, is and then it obviously never would happen. It's really sad. So Sue tells us that Alexis, she left with nothing. She had nothing. For someone who was going to be running away from home, she didn't have anything that you would need to survive on your own. Anything that, in today's age, we would take, as women especially, we would take our purse or our wallet or our phone or our car key. Like, we're taking those things to get us from point A to point B. She didn't have any of those things. She didn't have a jacket. It's wintertime. She didn't have, her purse or backpack. She didn't have anything. But again, we're also being told by Dennis that she left with money. So we're thinking, oh, well, maybe she had money, but she didn't have the money that did belong to her. So that's interesting. So we do kind of, or it's asked, like, how is Dennis taking all of this? Or Sue asks Brenda, how is Dennis kind of taking all of this? And Brenda would say, oh, well, we can't talk about it because it upsets him. Oh, does it? Oh, does it? Then I'll go ahead, y'all, because he has a nerve. It doesn't upset him, not for the reasons that you would think it upsets him, but like, I don't care if it upsets you. Be uncomfortable. I don't care. I'm sorry, I'm going ahead here. Anyway, and at that point, Sue actually called the police to say, yo, I think you might need to look at Dennis Bowman with respect to the disappearance of Aundria. But again, nothing happened. So, because I feel like if they dug into, guys, this man had a record at the time that Alexis went missing. If they did any police work, they would have been like, okay, that's weird. You know what I mean? We're going to get into it. Trust me. We're getting into it right now. So Cathy ends up doing a FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Act request on Dennis. She wants to get the deets on this guy. And does he have a record that is miles fucking long? He was caught for breaking and entering. He had a bag that contained a gun when he did the breaking and entering. He served a year for that. The second situation was in 1980. He was about 31 years old, and he attacked a teenager. And it was pretty violent. It's very, I think, of the scope of what Meta dealt with. He basically says, we're told this teenager to get off the bike and go into the woods. Because the teenager did not respond as quickly as he would have liked, he shoots a gun at her twice to scare her. Doesn't actually shoot her in the body, but shoots at her to kind of be like, get the fuck off the bike and get in the woods. Like, are you kidding? And it was, I don't know if anything actually did happen. Thank God it didn't. I think that's kind of what I remember. A truck was going by and she was able to get into the truck and get away from him. But it's because of the firing of the gun and obviously the attempt of probably come on. We know your intention here, Dennis. The court concluded that he was a danger to women if he wasn't going to be, if not confined, and he was sentenced to 5 to 10 years. And here's the part that no one understands. Brenda would take, at the time, their 6-year-old daughter to go visit this man in prison who was just imprisoned for trying to attack an 18-year-old girl. But because she's legally an adult, we're fine here? No, let's be real. She's a child. She just happened to be 18 years old. I don't understand the warped mind of Brenda. And this is the tip of the iceberg. We haven't even gone into Brenda really in terms of where she stands when it comes to her marriage. So even though he was supposed to serve 5 to 10 years, he served more like 5 because he got out in 1986 and Alexis was 11 years old at the time, which is around the time, if we can remember, Dennis earlier said, oh, she was a great kid. And then something just switched in her around 12 or 13. Don't know what happened. Sort of running away from home. Don't know, but I'll tell you what happened. First of all, number one, how can you even claim to know whether or not your child was a good kid? You weren't there for the more formative years. Let's be real here. Number two, you want to know what changed? You changed, sir. You came into that house around the time where the changes happened. Could it be because you were doing something to her? And again, as a mother, Brenda, you would think you would ask some questions, at least to Alexis, are you okay? Is something going on? And maybe have an open dialogue, because let's just play devil's advocate here. Let's pretend Dennis probably wasn't sexually assaulting Alexis, which I don't believe anyways. But let's just pretend for argument's sake he wasn't. Just the fact that he's back in the house when he wasn't in the house for 5 years is enough of a change for a child. Maybe she's struggling with that. Did no one talk to her at all? And I know it was the 80s and things were different, but Like, did no one have some sort of open dialect with this child who was used to not having her father physically in the home for 5 years of her life? Something, you know? Like, come on. So, Cathy talks about attending a missing persons conference that would happen in Michigan. It was a yearly thing. And she went in 2013, and Brenda is there. And Cathy is like, oh, hell no. And she jumps up and says, tell these people who your husband is. Yes, bitch. Tell these people who your husband is. And Carl gets involved while Cathy's like holding up a find Aundria Bowman sign. Hey, bitch. Hey, bitch. Tell them who your husband is. I love it. I'm sorry. And Carl is, it's like, it's a little weird. Like your husband's at, in prison for attacking an 18-year-old for 5 years. And it's just weird. We're just saying it's weird. Okay. And Brenda thinks, oh, this is going to scare them. You should be happy. My husband's not here. I'm like, oh, bitch, bring him. Bring him. Bring him. I'll wait. You think I'm scared of him? Go fuck off. Oh, please. Ugh. Oh, okay. And we then see Cathy and Carl using a drone. This is amazing. Cathy's like, I'm on to this shit. And we use a drone at their home, the Bowman's house, because she was obsessed with his backyard. Hold on to this, guys. Again, for those people who did not watch the documentary or don't want to watch the documentary, which I highly recommend you should. She is really fixated on the backyard because she believes Alexis is in the backyard. And she calls the police to say, get a search warrant. She's back there. Get a step in. She's back there. And the police was like, so here's the thing. We can't just go back in people's backyards because we have a hunch. Like we need evidence to allow us to go in there. So we can't just go in there. Shit. So, they do say though, even though they can't do that, he's the top of the list. Don't you worry. So what does Cathy do instead to kind of make them feel a little bit uncomfortable, which I'm fine with that. Let's make them uncomfortable. She puts a billboard right near their house that they have to keep driving past to be like, find Aundria Bowman. And she's like, yeah, I was taunting him. And what? Come at me. Oh, like this is like, I love Cathy. So one time she tells us, I called them and I got the answer machine. Okay. So I ripped into them till I got the beep. So I called back, wait for the answer machine to click back in. And I go at it again and then beep, call back and do it again. Beep, call back and do beep. Like she's like, maybe I shouldn't have been doing that. But I would have. Are you kidding? And then Brenda calls the police to be like, hello? I had a crazy mom on line 1 who won't stop calling because she thinks my husband killed her daughter. Help. Okay. We'll help you. We'll help you. Help you no longer have your husband in the house. So then Meta calls Cathy and says, hey, Kath, they got him. They got him. What do you mean? They got him. They got him. She's like, finally, they're charging him in the death of my daughter. Not quite. So we're with Dennis and the detectives. And they say to him, like, do you know why you're here? And he's like, no, I have no clue why I'm here. You're like, well, you're here because we're charging you with the 1980 death of a woman in Virginia named Kathleen Doyle. Who the fuck is Kathleen Doyle? And why the fuck do we think that Dennis is the one who killed her? We're going to get all those answers in episode 2. So that's the end of this episode. Oh, guys, God. Like I said, this documentary is an incredible documentary. It's probably one of my favorites. And I believe the same creators of The Keepers also did this one, if I'm correct. And The Keepers was incredible. Maybe or maybe not, I will do that one because I loved that one. It was just it was incredibly made documentary. This is so good. So again, if you haven't watched it and this is intriguing you, go watch it. Run to Netflix and watch this documentary. It's Into the Fire. It is incredible. It's amazing. So that's that. Next week we will be coming in to episode 2, part 2 of this documentary. That'll be next week, so look out for that. But that is it for me, guys. That's it for this. Again, this is incredible, and I will see you guys next week for part 2.